Good morning. The worst may be yet to come for Houston. More torrential rain is threatening to drown a city that is already in very deep water. The flooding is now forecast to peak on Wednesday and Thursday, and heavy weather is making it harder to ramp up the rescue work. The U.S. Coast Guard says the storm system is hampering air rescue work like what we're seeing in this video, conditions at times making it unsafe to fly. But he points out that air crews have been able to rescue hundreds of people. One of many scenes playing out in the Houston area right now, that senior taken into safety in that chopper. Stephen D'Souza is on the ground in downtown Houston. He's leading off our coverage. It's a little bit lighter now, so we can get a real sense of the damage and what's going on with the flooding behind. But it's interesting, Stephen, I was calculating, one weather analyst was saying 11 trillion gallons of water have fallen. So we're talking about close to 40 trillion liters in our measurements of water just since Friday night. I mean, these are unprecedented levels of rain and flooding. It's extraordinary.
It's essentially a city underwater here in Houston, and you can see the skyline behind me and where we are. I'll get to a little bit of that in a second, but we just had an update from federal officials in the last hour, and they basically confirmed what people on the ground here realize, that we're not out of the woods yet, that this is still a long way from being over. This is a marathon, and we're about halfway through the marathon right now. 700 millimeters of rain has fallen on Houston, and 500 to 600 millimeters more are expected. And just to give you a sense of just what that means for people on the ground, they're saying they're expecting 30,000 people to go into shelters. The head of FEMA saying that's what the focus is now, is this is not even close to being a recovery effort. It's about helping all of those people get out of their homes, get out of their cars, and get into shelters. They say as many as 450,000 people could be registering as flood victims. Here's more from the head of FEMA.
Citizens to be involved. Texas, this is a landmark event. We have not seen an event like this. You could not draw this forecast up. You could not dream this forecast up. It's been a very challenging effort for the National Weather Service, who's been putting out great information. We've been telling people that this is coming. It's still ongoing.
Now, overnight, 2 reservoirs, the Army Corps of Engineers actually released water, which had the effect of raising water levels in some neighborhoods, including here along Buffalo Bayou, and that's where we are. This is the main waterway that goes through Houston. You can see the extent of the flooding here, and you might think it's counterintuitive. Why would you release more water into neighborhoods? Well, they say the alternative was even worse, which was letting more rain fall from the sky, fill up those reservoirs, possibly burst the dams, and cause even more catastrophic damage than we've already seen.
Stephen, we've been talking to people who are awaiting rescue, not in any imminent danger, but we heard again, as you say, from those FEMA officials that 30,000 people may have to seek shelter temporarily in these evacuation centers. As you speak to people there, what are their concerns and how are they handling this event?
Well, I mean, a lot of the concern was just trying to reach emergency officials, how overwhelmed 911 was yesterday. Officials today saying, still don't call unless you're in a life-threatening situation, because they just have to deal with such a huge volume of calls, telling people to go onto their roof, wave a white towel. And we were at one of the main shelters at the convention center yesterday, and we spoke with one woman who had to carry each of her 5 children, one as young as 1 year old, the eldest was 12, through rushing water to get to safety. And that was just some of the stories we heard. But many people, even though the warnings were there and that this was essentially what they predicted, still were caught unaware. And so we asked people about that, and here's what a couple had to say.
I think there should have been a mandatory evacuation, yes. Me and a whole bunch of other families got caught up and lost a bunch of things.
We haven't heard any official word from any official here, but we out here, Mayor, we looking for you, City Councilman, we looking for you. Anybody of importance, we looking for you.
Now, we actually put the question to a congressman, or congresswoman rather, from this area who we saw at the shelter yesterday. Why wasn't there a mandatory evacuation? She says, consider that this is the 4th largest city in America. In the past, they had tried to do that for a previous storm, but what ended up happening was massive traffic jams, people running out of gas, people actually dying in their cars on their way trying to get out of the city. And with the storm really encompassing such a wide area, there was really nowhere for them to go. And so they said the alternative was worse, and that the option to evacuate the city just simply wasn't feasible. And so now they're dealing with the aftermath of that decision. And one of the things that stood out for me in the news conference held earlier was that they said even if the rain stops later this week, even as early as Monday, that the floodwaters aren't going to recede quickly. So even if this rain does stop, the worst and the flooding still won't go away for a while.
That ground is already super saturated, and you're right, Stephen. It was striking to hear city officials, the mayor notably, defending his decision not to order that mandatory evacuation, thinking it is the right course of action. Much more to come from officials today and from Stephen D'Souza, our lead reporter on the ground there in Houston. Stephen, stand by, and thank you again very much for this hour. We are